Hello, everyone. Welcome to Detour Ahead on this last Friday. We have today Shirin Majid, who's joined us. Really amazing. I got to know her quite recently, about a year ago, actually, when she invited me to take her portrait. So after having a long conversation with her, I was really impressed with her background and the trajectory, professional and personal trajectory of her work and her life. And so I thought she'd be really good to bring and give all of you a talk and speak about that a little bit. I'm going to introduce you reading her short bio, which for Detour Ahead. Shirin's 25-year career has been a series of detours, from beginnings in PR in Washington, D.C., to digital roles at a startup and a global social network in New York, to being the first creative director at the world's biggest social publisher and the first female deputy ECD at a top advertising agency in London. Currently executive creative director of Virtue, Vice Media Group's in-house creative agency. Shirin leads a 30-plus team of culture-first creatives and designers across Europe. On the side, she paints geometric abstracts in preparation for her second career as an artist. I think Shirin will give us a lot of insight into, you know, what it's like now to work in a creative agency and what they're looking for, but also primarily, I think her own sort of experience and the detour she's taken in her own professional life will be of great interest to all of us. So welcome, Shirin.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful and exciting to be here. Thank you, Adam, for inviting me. I really wish I could see all of you students out there. So please chat as much as possible. I would love to see any feedback, and I would love to make this, you know, even more of a conversation. So what I want to talk to you about today is just a bit about my background, a bit about what I do at Virtue, but also just chat you through the detours of my career and what's really shaped that path, and also share some of the learnings with you. And then at the end, just open it up for questions, because I would just love to help you on your paths as much as possible. And I'll share my contact details as well, because I'm very open and I love to really help people guide their paths as well. So we'll start off. I've got some slides for you. Hello, I am Shirin. If you want to pop the slide up there. Hi, Soraya. I'm Shirin. It's pronounced Shirin. I will just flip to the next slide. So I am the Executive Creative Director of Virtue, which, as Adam mentioned, is the creative agency of the Vice Media Group. Vice Media Group owns Vice, Refinery 29, Pulse Films, and ID Magazine. It's a really exciting place to be, to work in an agency that is at the heart of such a large global entertainment group. So Virtue works with a range of clients, really to help brands build their brands from the inside of culture. So that is everything from big advertising campaigns to immersive experience to NFTs and entering into the metaverse these days. I've just shared a few of our snapshots of some recent case studies. The top left there is we recreated the Berlin Wall in Minecraft to help young people then take down Minecraft, the wall inside Minecraft, to really give a deeper understanding of what happened during those events. Top right, we work with Converse to help launch a sustainable shoe brand. So to do that, we launched a virtual store on the Pacific Garbage Patch and then took it down immediately. Again, another virtual experience that you can interact with. The bottom left there, we created a digital line of clothing for a Swedish brand called Carlings. And part of that was a t-shirt that you could wear as a statement shirt and keep changing up the statements. And then bottom left, we worked with Coca-Cola to create an NFT that was then sold and auctioned off for over $500,000, which was then donated to the Special Olympics. So a really interesting range of work. You might have seen we just launched a big ad with Lizzo in the States for Logitech. Again, it's all culture first work. So to do that, I run a team of more than 30 creatives and designers, all spread across Europe, London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Vienna, Copenhagen, and Paris. So actually everything that's happened in the pandemic to kind of reshape the way we work and work virtually has really helped our team function as one team. So a lot of agencies work sort of by market. We have what's called a borderless agency across Europe. So we work in one big team. And what's wonderful about that is really getting the diverse perspectives from people in different cultures. So as an executive creative director for Europe, I'm responsible for everything from the creative output of the agency all the way through ensuring we've got the right creative resource on the right briefs, working with clients, pitching ideas. I serve as creative director on campaigns as well personally. And so it's just the whole scope of, who we choose as a photographer or a director on a project, all the way through to, styling on a shoot. So it's a really multifaceted job, and I don't rest a whole lot. So I am also a huge supporter of underrepresented talent in the industry as well. So beyond my kind of day-to-day job, I mentor outside the agency. I work with the likes of Commercial Break. I'm also a judge on many different award panels like Cannes Lions, Young Lions, and I'm also on the UK Creative Council for Snapchat, which is very much focused on using the platform to help serve underrepresented communities as well. And then finally, during the pandemic, I joined as a non-exec director of a board for a group called Good Brains for Good Brands, which during the pandemic united people that were furloughed, either creatives and strategists, with charities who really needed the support for fundraising and creating campaigns around that. So that's just a little bit about the world of what I do now. I did want to share a little bit about me personally. I'm Shirin, the human born from PIRZADA and PATRICIA. I think your personal background and everything, your life's experiences all lead to your career path and your perspective in one way or another. So that's little baby me. The first picture, my parents are Kashmiri. My dad is from Kashmir in India, and my mum is from England. But I've grown up in Holland, Canada, and America. So from a young age, I observed cultures, and that's really what's driven my career path is really exploring different cultures, observing them, and I've observed from the inside and outside of cultures. So I also went to the University of Texas at Austin, which has 55,000 students in it. So I look at that as something that really shaped my career path, or kind of lack of a vision for it, because there were so many students. You had to be really self-guided in how you sought the guidance. And I got a little bit lost in there. So I think that really shaped my career. And I think if I had more guidance, or if I had sought out more guidance, I would have had a very different career path. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a little bit. The one in the middle there is my little mini me, Ella. I have an 8-year-old, and how that has impacted my career is that it completely changed my kind of value of time. And instead of staying in some jobs, for longer than I normally would have, I don't kind of stay in something that isn't working. I really value my time, because I see it as basically whatever I do has to be really worth not spending time with her. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as well. And then the next one is just some of my favorite work these days is really exploring new ways to connect brands with culture. So I've really been getting into AR, mixed reality, VR, and now, exploring the metaverse more. And it's really that what guides my work. I really like to push brands in the way they interact with their audiences. And then the final one is my latest piece of art. I love to paint, and if I won the lottery, that's probably what I would do all day long. This piece is called Your Mind is the Metaverse. So what I do informs my art informs what I do. And I've always been, a passionate artist, have painted my whole life. And I can talk about this in a bit more detail, but I sort of missed the boat on going to art school. I didn't have a self-belief about it. It wasn't kind of, back then I didn't have social media. I didn't really know how to get into it, and it wasn't hugely supported in my family. So I think if things would have been very different today, if I would have had social media tools, more guidance, I probably would have gone more the path of artist. So that brings me to my detours. So I think this is a really, really interesting topic for a talk, because detours are essentially, a diversion from your intended path. But what if you didn't start with an intended path? What if you didn't really know where you were going to start with? So what I'm going to focus on is really my kind of self-inflicted detours, because there have been many detours in my life, that you have these macro detours that you can't really do anything about. The pandemic, 9/11 is something I kind of lived through in New York, divorce, deaths of loved ones. But what I'm going to focus on is really what shaped my path. So, it was interesting, the first sort of 5 to 10 years, I thought that my whole career was a little bit of a mistake, to be honest. So in university, I ended up doing a liberal arts degree. I did a major in English and a minor in anthropology. And I always wanted to just be a writer. I painted, but as well, I have this passion for writing. So I really wanted to maybe write for magazines or write a novel. But I hadn't sought enough guidance on how to get on that path. So I was writing a bit after university and working in a clothing shop, kind of loving my bohemian life. But my dad called me up and said, I'm not going to support that anymore. You need to get a proper job. So I kind of shipped off to Washington, D.C., where a lot of my friends had jobs in public affairs. And I took a job in PR. And this is the first detour, the first major detour that I kind of saw as the original mistake that guided the path for the rest of my career to sort of get away from. So just to give you a bit more context there. So I went to Washington, D.C. I took a bunch of interviews, and I got 2 interesting job offers. One was at the National Geographic, which paid zero to little money to be a runner there, but that probably would have gotten me more into a path of writing. And then I had this other interesting one that was at the Grocery Manufacturers of America, which doesn't sound very creative, but it would have given me more opportunity to do a lot of different things, because it was a communications assistant role. So I would have done some graphic design. It was the beginning of websites. So, I could help them build their original website and do writing and just learn all about PR. And it also offered about $8,000 more. So I took that role. I took that role for, monetary reasons, and also because I thought it would be, more interesting. But it actually took me on a path that was further away from what I was really passionate about. So what was started to really drive me was getting back to doing something I was passionate about, because, doing the 9 to 5 in a job that I wasn't really excited about, it was really difficult in my 20s. So, a lot of different stuff happened, but then I had the opportunity to move to New York, and I took another PR job, but it was in a fashion agency, which was interesting. But again, it wasn't what I was passionate about. It wasn't really, I was more of a publicist. I wasn't a creative. So then, 9/11 happened, and the whole landscape kind of changed. So I quit that job, and I made a really bold move to just take some time off and explore the more creative side of what I wanted to do. So I took a month off, and I visited a bunch of different universities. I considered going back to school for graphic design, which was something I was really passionate about as well. But unfortunately, the money ran out, and the landscape was really, really difficult. So then I took another job in PR, which I was headhunted for to make a living after 9/11. So you can see that the decline, I was making decisions that were basically to make a living. But what I started to do in this next job, which was in a PR agency, but now I was working as a copywriter. So at least I was writing, and I was just trying to bring more and more of what I wanted into a job that wasn't what I really had intended to do. So from here, I worked in the editorial group of a global PR agency, and at least I was writing every day. But then social media started to happen. This was sort of the early 2000s, and I was really interested in that. So I started doing more exploration about, working in different social media platforms. It was kind of the beginnings of MySpace and Facebook. And I started to have these conceptual ideas of how brands could exist within there. So I was really starting to carve out my own niche, because there weren't many creatives that were actually addressing this area. But it wasn't until I was working with a planning director, and I didn't even know where these ideas were coming from. And he said, "You're a creative." And I didn't even know that that was a possible career path for me. I was like, "What? Why are you calling it a creative?" I didn't even know that it could be used as a noun. And it took somebody else kind of shining a light on my natural talent to make me realize that was a career path for me. And this was already about kind of 5-6 years into my career. So from there, I actually joined the digital team, and I was fascinated by, because digital was growing and growing and growing, and I was fascinated by how you could connect and how you could shape that content. So I was forging new ideas about how brands could then connect with their audiences. So from there, I was promoted several times, because I was building this kind of core competency in a creative area that not many other creatives were. So I was promoted to associate creative director, and I created some of the first social media campaigns. And so from there, I was still living in New York, but I had always wanted to move back to London. London is just, to me, is just the best city in the world. So because I had been doing so much good work, I was becoming quite indispensable in that department. And I just asked if I could work from the London office, which was kind of a bold move, because it is a 5-hour time difference. And my boss at the time amazingly supported that. And so I moved over to the London office of the PR agency where I was working for. And I basically helped that digital group adapt social media as a discipline. So in that role, I did things like the first mobile creative campaign from Motorola, which was basically getting the Guinness World Record for the world's highest phone call. And then I also led the first social media launch for the London Olympics. So a lot of really interesting big campaigns that were groundbreaking. And this is all because I was charting my own path and following what I was really curious about, and also trying to bring in my passions for writing and developing creative concepts. So all of that experience that I built up led me to be headhunted for a creative director role at a comms agency, at a really interesting creative agency. So that was kind of my breakthrough role. And that's when the detours started becoming more positives. And I started to be able to self-direct my career a bit more. Instead of moving away from what I thought were mistakes, I was building and building and building my experience. So from there, it was the same kind of situation because I'd built up these core skills in social media and had so much knowledge about it. It was a real point of difference for me as a creative. So this agency was another PR agency, but they really wanted to break out into more areas. So what I had done there was I started to build a team of multidisciplinary creatives in content, in events, and we pulled together to make a really dynamic team that we started to come up with these massive big ideas. And we were working with many different brands like Smirnoff and Guinness and Spotify, and really creating some groundbreaking work. So from there, I moved back to New York to actually open up the New York office of this agency, which again, for me, was a bit of a detour because I loved London, but there was this huge opportunity to establish this New York office. And I only meant to go back for 6 months, but I ended up staying for 6 years and creating some of the best work of my career. So again, it was all about really finding the positives in these detours. And then, I got married along the way, and one of the biggest detours was actually becoming pregnant. And from there, I was, really sort of building this New York office, but it wasn't really working for me. And I just decided to freelance from there. So after I got pregnant, I freelanced for 5 years, but that also allowed me to explore all of these different opportunities. So, there were some people that were giving me advice, and they said, you're at the top of your career, like just keep going. And I just really wanted to take the time, spend time with my child. So it was kind of like, a lateral move to freelance at that time. And then my child was kind of 3, 4, and we wanted to move back to London. But I made a little bit of a mistake, and I took the first job that was offered to me. And it was another PR role, which was just kind of moving back towards, a place that I wasn't passionate about. So that was seen for me as a kind of a negative detour. And so after that, I only took about 5 months in that role, and I quit because it wasn't enough to kind of justify time away from my child. But because I'd gone in all these different directions, and I was starting to build up quite a multifaceted career, I became the first creative director at the Lad Bible, which was just starting to become really popular. But it was a really interesting turn for me because it was another dimension to my career. And from there, I've been headhunted into various executive creative director roles. And that's because of this multifaceted career that I've built up. So, what I saw in my earlier side of the career as kind of mistakes has actually been the value of my experience in kind of exploring all these different areas of marketing and advertising. So that is kind of a summary of my detours. I thought it might be interesting to see, as you're starting out and building your CV, what that looks like as a CV, because I think, what I did early on in my career is I kind of sweat the small stuff of like, what's it going to look like on my CV. But once you really, keep forging ahead and, doing what you're passionate about, the first few years actually doesn't really matter. And you can see I've kind of like faded out the bits where I wasn't doing the creative work. But I really worked hard to steer my path back to what I was passionate about. So, also some of the best work of my career came out of these detours. So I'm just going to share, a couple pieces of my favorite work. So back to when I was at the creative agency where I started the New York office. I was actually in a couple workshops for Smirnoff and working with several different agencies on cracking this big global idea for a campaign for Smirnoff. And until then, I'd been making like really good work, really interesting work, but not really big breakthrough work. And I never sort of considered myself as one of those bigger global creative directors. But I was in these creative workshops with all these different agencies and, some of the most awarded creative directors in the world. So it was up to us to collaboratively come up with this idea together. But I came up with this idea of actually different territories, different countries, swapping nightlife and swapping nightlife trends to really cross-pollinate nightlife culture. And it was the idea that was chosen, and it went on to be one of the biggest campaigns in Smirnoff's history. It was its first global campaign. It was run in 50 different countries. In the first year, on one night, we swapped nightlife trends from 14 different countries on the same night. We had, all global talent in there. In the second year, we had Madonna doing it. And it completely changed my perception of what I was capable of. And that kind of unlocked my self-belief in what I was capable of. And I started, thinking bigger and kind of having a bigger vision for myself. So instead of really kind of looking at my job and my career as making a living, it became more about like dreaming and having a vision for what I could do. And from here, I started to really build my vision for creating work that has a positive impact on culture. So that's not just about, working with charities or, taking on specific issues like equality and inclusion. It's also just about you making work that people enjoy and that entertains people. So that's, that was some of my favorite work. And what I also like to do, because I'm so passionate about arts and music and culture, is bring that into my work a lot as well. So this middle one here was just actually a small brief for Smirnoff to create a limited edition bottle. And so I had an idea to work with different street artists. So we worked with D-Face, who made this amazing bottle of these original bottles cast in concrete. So, that's something else that I do is really try to bring what I'm passionate about into my work. So again, I'm very passionate about art and also working with different artists to give them a platform. So another favorite piece of work that came out of a detour was the work I've done for the British Red Cross. So at my last agency, we approached the British Red Cross to do a big fundraising campaign for them. But then the pandemic hit. So we actually got briefed the week before we went into lockdown, and the entire campaign had to be created in lockdown. So so this also meant, you couldn't do shoots, you couldn't do, the same kind of collaborative meetings that you needed to do to create a campaign. So literally the first week of lockdown, coronavirus was everywhere. The British Red Cross had to get out an appeal for coronavirus immediately to drive donations to support the vulnerable. So I worked with, I literally called up myself all the best artists that I could think of. This first poster is by Anthony Burrell, to dedicate a poster to the campaign. So the three posters that you see, these are three different campaigns for the British Red Cross to drive fundraising throughout the pandemic. And each one of them, I worked with 10 different artists to create their own piece for it. So the final one was working with the amazing Yinka Ilori, and we created this beautiful mural in Shoreditch. So I worked with more than 24 artists throughout the pandemic, and we ended up helping raise almost £4 million for the British Red Cross. So this piece of work kind of brings all my most passionate pursuits together, which is working with artists and also making a positive impact and helping charities like the British Red Cross. So I just wanted to share a little bit of what I've learned. These might be obvious, but sometimes we overlook the most obvious lessons. A big one for me is choosing the challenge and not the paycheck. A lot of my kind of perceived mistakes that I made were because I was choosing security over something that I was really passionate about. but at the same time, regret nothing, learn from everything. I don't believe in regrets. And I've since changed my mind about seeing, these as mistakes that I've made. I see them as learning opportunities, because for every turn I took, I found a way to make the most from it, and to really learn from it. And ultimately, I have, this amazing job right now because of all those paths I took, because I have such diverse experience. Advertising has changed significantly from, agencies looking from creative directors that have a very, very linear path and have, gone to ad school and really honed their craft, to looking for creatives that are called non-traditional creatives that have a really diverse experience, that understand how social works, that know how to navigate different digital channels, and that have a real breadth of experience. The next one is do what gets you out of bed in the morning. I mean, this is kind of everything. If you do what gets you out of bed in the morning, you will have a happy and fulfilled life and a career full of purpose. So I think, when you're a student and just starting out, and if you don't know exactly what you want to do, really focus on what guides you viscerally, like what really affects your energy in the morning. For me, early on in my career, it was the graphic design side. In that funny old job in Washington D.C., I couldn't wait to get out of bed and design their newsletters or design the website. And if I'd have listened to that little voice, I probably would have gone back to school for design early on, which would have shaped a very different path for me. And the next one is don't be a dick. Treat others with respect. This is really heed my advice on this one, because I think you can't underestimate the power of a positive attitude and how much that impacts the jobs you will get, the jobs you will keep. I think there's so many incredibly creative, talented people that I've worked with that have not had the best experience in their careers because they haven't had the best attitude. And equally, I've seen time after time, people being chosen for awards or jobs or promotions because of a balance of talent, experience, and just a really great attitude, somebody that people want to work with. So it's really important to remember that all the way through your career, treating others with respect, whether that's up or down. And I've learned some hard lessons that way when I've been kind of stressed in the past as well, and not treated people the way I should have. I think it's really good to kind of check yourself on that all the way through your career. And then finally, it's the detours that really give you the most valuable perspective. And again, it's really important when these detours happen to you, whether they're self-guided or if they're inflicted on you, to really gain some valuable perspective from it. And again, I wouldn't be where I am in my career if it wasn't for all these detours. These detours have made me a much more interesting person, a much more interesting candidate for jobs. And they make my work more interesting because I have a broader perspective from all the different things that I've done. So that's it. And I hope I didn't waffle too much, but I'd love to take any questions you have. If you don't have questions now, like I said, I'm very open. Please feel free to email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And also, if you want to check out my art, everything you see here on Instagram.
Shirin, that was amazing, super inspiring. And I definitely, there's parts of your advice in that second last slide, I think that will be incredibly, regardless of if you say that it's quite obvious, it really isn't, and sometimes you need to read it and see it and hear it from someone else to really pay attention to it. And I think we can all relate. And that's a really nice slide. I think that's something we should bring up in the future. But we do have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. Soria wrote, I'm a big fan of Minecraft, love it when people create artworks in it. And we have a question here from Mrs. Zika, who writes, do you see street art accepted inside the Tate in years to come?
I mean, that's probably more a question for a curator at Tate, but you know, I think I'd love to talk about art as well and my perspective on that, because my next career, I want to be all about helping support talent and artists that haven't necessarily gone a linear path either. I'm a kind of self-taught artist, and I don't think there's enough acknowledgement within the art industry for those that don't go the linear path, and it's kind of a parallel to advertising. The biggest stars of advertising are those who have gone to ad school and have all the awards. It's the same for artists as well. It's it's as much as their story. It's as much as where they went to school, where they went to university, where they've exhibited. And I think that social media is completely changing that. You can chart your own path in social media and build your own presence and build your own community now. So I'm diverging from your question of saying street art accepted inside Tate. Like, does it matter? That's about the establishment acknowledging street art as a true art form. I think it should be. I've always loved street art, and I love to see how it's transformed over the years from your kind of your rogue artists to muralists. So I think that I don't know how important it is that it's seen inside Tate. It absolutely should be.
Good. I couldn't agree more. In the beginning of your talk, you talked about how you support underrepresented talent. And I think that would be really interesting to maybe expand upon a little bit in terms of what advice could you maybe give students, artists, commercial photographers, etc., to sort of be seen and develop their practice and where, I mean, how could they be supported as underrepresented creators also?
Yeah, because there's a few different ways that I do that. One, it's mentoring, and in the field of advertising and marketing, there are several different organizations that do that. Like I said, Commercial Break, but also through bringing them onto my teams, but also in the partners that we work with and the artists that I work with on campaigns, to the directors, to the photographers we work with. There is a spotlight now on diverse talent, whether that's being female or being a person of color. So back to building your social media presence, it can't be underestimated how important that is. So for example, when I worked on the commissions for the British Red Cross, my starting point was Instagram. And I had a focus on underrepresented talent as well, and artists, and I found them through Instagram. So I was looking for those with a bigger following, because this is all about sharing and driving awareness of these campaigns. And you have to be active. You have to get your work out there, out there, work in progress, tell the story of who you are. The other thing I look for at the British Red Cross is like-minded artists as well, those that were kind of spreading positivity and kindness. And that then gave them a platform as well, because those were shared, across the British Red Cross channels. So it's really understanding how to navigate and build your profile in social. That will be such an asset. When I'm looking for creatives to join my team or designers, I look at their portfolio. I mean, you have to have an online portfolio, is an absolute minimum, but you can also build your whole kind of brand world, posting it on Behance. You've got to build your own social channels, have a website. Websites actually aren't as important as they used to be. I'm seeing more and more creatives now are just doing Google Docs, which is really easy to navigate as well. So if you're a little bit shy about having a website out there, that's also a really good option to have. And just get yourself out there, meet people, don't be shy, email me, connect with me. I'll put you in touch with other people. Just, early on in my career, like I said, like we didn't even have the World Wide Web. We didn't have email. If I'd have had these tools, I would have probably taken a very different path. Again, I don't regret where I am, but I think that you have to use the tools available, and they are just, plentiful.
That's really good advice, and that's very generous of you to allow people to reach out to you. I think that would be incredibly valuable. We have a comment from Bronwyn who says, as a photographer, I sometimes feel locked into this one path, but hearing your talk really reminds me that creators have so many open doors if the desire to broaden horizons is there. And I think you've spoken a lot about that.
Absolutely. I think it's, yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, I mean, the one thing that resonated with me also, I think, is specific to motherhood is when you said that, having had a child really made you value your time and made you sort of informed your decisions professionally in terms of, is this worth time away from my child? I think that's a really important point to make. Yeah.
And also, it shouldn't just apply to parents, though. I wish I'd have valued my time that much before, But when your time is so limited, you really want to fill it with time that's worthwhile. So, but I did want to say to Bronwyn as well, like it is all about just keeping an open mind. And I can't tell you enough. I think sometimes as well, when you're at an early stage in your career, I did feel like that. I felt locked into what I was doing. But again, it's just about just following your intuition, following your gut, following what you're passionate about. There are so many creatives that I work with that are just, they're DJs on the side, they're photographers, they're, it's the slash kind of generation. You can do whatever you're passionate about. It's where you're building your skill as well. That is one point that I didn't put on there that is so important. It is really, really important to build your skill in an area that you're passionate about. And if you're not passionate about where you're funneling all that time, those 10,000 plus hours, really think about that. It's just never too late to change your path either. I don't see, I'm 47 years old. I've had a 25-year career. I'm literally looking ahead to what I'm doing next. I might even go to art school next. I don't really see an end to things, or kind of, a time frame for when you should or shouldn't do something.
Someone at the UEL said 10,000 hours, and that's in reference to to that article by in the New Yorker by what was it? What was his name?
I can't recall his name.
Yeah, but basically the theory is that you really need to spend at least 10,000 hours on any one thing to become comfortable and virtuous at it. Yeah. And they, I think, used the Beatles as an example and what they were doing in Amsterdam. But yeah, super interesting talk. I think there's a lot to take away from this. I wonder if we have any more questions. Here we go. Do you feel that the time when you have not been under the influence of social media have formed you as a creative waiting to be explored by the time social media arrived?
I feel... I'm not sure what the question means.
I think when you weren't, because you said that when you came across social media, I'm not sure if I'm reading this right or understanding it right, but I think that when you were before you started working social media, there was a moment where you thought, oh my God, this is my space in order to express myself and work within. And do you feel maybe that your experience before that sort of prepared you in any way for the oncoming of social media or the arrival of social media?
Yeah, I mean, so much of my career has been in social media, but I have been really focused on making that, a positive impact. And, there's so much that's discussed about social media being, negative. It's only been positive for me, I think, because, you have to choose what you look at as well. It only opened me up as a creative, to an entire new world. And I think that I'm the better for it, to be honest. I don't think I'm a different creative, because it's all about curiosity, you know, and again, it's all about like following what you're passionate about. And to me, it's just another research tool and a tool to connect. So if you use it in the positive ways like that, then it can only be a positive. The reason that I gravitated to working in social media is, and the reason that I gravitate to immersive tech and, you know, working with the likes of Snapchat or looking at, you know, Decentraland, is I'm really interested in the way that people connect and finding new ways that technology can help people connect, again, in a positive way. So whether it's social media back then or the metaverse now, who knows what's next, it's all about, you know, building culture and again, finding ways for people to connect.
So Maria says, I agree. It's also I'm also 48 and changed my path to photography. Thank you. Makes me feel better. We have another question from Eliza. There we go. You can read it.
Yes, that is. So I know you don't believe in regrets, but are there times when you feel failures? If so, how do you cope with this feeling? I feel failures every single week. You know, my job it sounds like, you know, super glamorous, but it's fraught with failure. And I think part of being a creative director is dealing with that, because, you know, you spend all this time building up ideas and campaign ideas and proposals and pitches, and, you know, probably about 20% of those actually ever get made. So for example, I've been working on a really, really exciting campaign that kind of started here, and it got directed to sort of a place that was a bit here. And you just have to keep perspective, I think, you know. You have to sort of count your blessings. You know, it sounds a bit cheesy, but like, I do believe in gratitude, and when you're really like feeling in the dumps, like really looking at what you do have, and then just moving ahead, just moving beyond it. Let yourself wallow in it. I actually had this chat with one of my creative directors earlier, just talking about this talk and what might be interesting to the students. And she said what really resonated with her was when she was having a really tough time on something. I was like, just cry. Just cry, just like give into it. Let yourself feel like a failure, and then pull yourself back up again and just move forward. That's all you can do.
Again, great advice. You're getting so many questions. This is from Simran. Your talk made me feel more confident about my career path. Thank you. I also wanted to ask you, how do you think the metaverse will affect the creative industry?
I think, well, what's happening right now is it's become a buzzword. You know, everybody's jumping on it. We're getting so many briefs from brands as well, going like, can we do something in the metaverse? I think to look forward, you have to look back. You can see what happened with social media. You know, it got used in good ways, it got used in bad ways, and now it's just become, you know, part of our kind of world of communication. I think that, you know, there will be a lot of experiments to figure out how it works. The reality is metaverse is actually just a buzzword. These virtual worlds have existed before. You know, there was Second Life over a decade ago. You know, I've done a ton of work in kind of mixed reality and AR, and those are all like forms of the metaverse. But I think it's just going to become, to be honest, just another set of channels. You know, for example, the amazing work that was done by our team in Copenhagen on the Minecraft Berlin Wall. Just a little bit of context about that was that the insight was, you know, Gen Z, younger Germans hadn't gone through that experience, hadn't seen it as surround sound and culture, so they didn't have as much resonance to what it meant. And the brief was from the DDR Museum in Berlin, was to create more relevance for it. So, you know, our incredible ECD in Copenhagen actually like physically made the Berlin Wall in Minecraft, which took a long time, so that you could then experience that and take that down. And that's a really positive way of using it, and a way that's relevant. The good will be, you know, using the metaverse to gain perspective and gain experience, and you know, using it as a positive way. The bad will be just throwing everything at it and just doing it for the sake of it being a trend. So, you know, that was the long answer. The short answer is that I believe it'll be just another media channel.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to see how that develops. Also, NFTs. We had a great panel earlier on in the week on NFTs, and yeah, it's it's sort of finding its place right now, isn't it? And there's a lot, as you say, there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of panic. People trying to sort of get in on it. So yeah, maybe it's about sort of understanding it and trying to let the dust settle before you maybe make a move as an artist or as a creator.
Yeah. Yeah,
Something
you have
like
to
that.
avoid and yet be driven by the FOMO. You know, you got to do
Exactly,
what's for you.
but be informed also. Know
Yeah,
what it's about.
yeah.
But so I think we have a little bit more time. We have 10 more minutes. So if anyone has any more questions for Shirin, or otherwise we could maybe talk a bit. I'm interested also in how your very diverse background, because a lot of UEL students have sort of a very diverse background as well. And in terms of different parents from different places, etc., having been born outside of the UK, how do you think that sort of helped you creatively or professionally?
I mean, I think it's everything for who I am as a creative. You know, it's like I said, I'm fascinated by culture and how people connect and how people communicate with each other, because I was born in Holland, and but I was sort of like an English kid back then. I had an English accent, so I was this outsider, and just sort of watching how Dutch people communicated. And then Canada and America, I was sort of like trying to sort of blend in. So I've really always observed culture from the inside and outside. And then also, my family being from Yorkshire and Kashmir in India, very, very different cultures. So, kind of makes you feel like an insider and an outsider. So yeah, it's all about, for me, it's all about observing cultures. And the other side of it is, my parents are, my dad is a cardiologist, and my mom was a teacher and then a philanthropist. So everything they did in their careers was about helping people, so I had this sort of innate purpose to help people. You're not helping lots of people in advertising, so I think that's another reason I was sort of, propelled away from PR, because I never felt like what I was doing was good enough to help people. So that's why the work that I've gravitated to creating is work that connects brands and culture in a really positive way. And, I know that I'm not saving lives with what I'm doing, but at the same time, you can bring broader perspectives to people en masse. So for example, the SMIRNOFF work with the SMIRNOFF Nightlife Exchange, the idea for that was to we could reach 50 countries and then expose all these different nightlife cultures. So that's just about opening people's minds to different cultures and how they go out. Or the British Red Cross work, which was actually like, really positively helping people by raising donations that would help the vulnerable. So that's really what's driven me. And I think it's really important as a creative to be self-aware about that, and be self-aware about like what from your path really informs your journey and what drives you, and how you can use that, to kind of to drive your own purpose. It is about, I think, at the ripe old age again of 47, you do think about your purpose. And I think after the pandemic, more and more people they're just thinking about like, what's the meaning of all this? Am I spending my time in the best way? So, students who are starting out have such an incredible opportunity to really think about their purpose and their life's work now, and how they want to spend their time.
Yes, another thing that resonated was, creating your own path. I think is really interesting. Like making these decisions and not being necessarily seduced by a bigger paycheck or a promotion, but actually asking yourself, is this, will this get me out of bed in the mornings? Will this motivate me? I think that's really an important decision to make, because you can definitely, there are decisions in my life that definitely would have made me wealthier, but not necessarily happier. Yeah. So we have a couple more questions actually. One asks, from Mrs. Zika, do you think creative industry is deriving towards branding itself rather than evolving authenticity with Instagram and Snapchat rise? So I guess it maybe is talking about how the creative industry is really focused sort of on its own branding rather than anything that's really authentic, maybe.
From a brand perspective, or so
I guess it's I think there's this sort of space where the social media sort of is so personal, and the branding, the use of social media for advertising and for branding sort of has to navigate maybe the space of like believability and authenticity.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe that's sort of where the question is going.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, especially at Virtue, which is all about creating like culture first work, we really work hard at working with brands to be authentic to their voice, because, you know, like, should a mayonnaise brand be really talking about equality? You know, it has to fit. It has to fit the brand world. It has to fit, you know, the relationship with the audience. So, and again, like, you know, my creative approach is very much human centered as well. Like, I don't want to create advertising that doesn't feel like it's of my world. So everything we do is about making things relatable and starting really with audience insights and you know, how do humans feel about this one thing. So I don't know if that answers the question, but definitely the best brands are the most authentic brands. You know, they're the most real and human.
Well, why don't we end? Yeah, I think that does answer the question. We can maybe end with this one last question, which I think is very interesting. Where do you see yourself going further from here? Or what do you want to do most next? I think you spoke very briefly about your art practice. Maybe you can expand a little on that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm really focused on what gets me out of bed every day. And my current job gives me a bit of scope for directing, you know, what it is we do and the type of work we do. So one, I'm very much focused on my creative team and helping them on their creative paths. And again, like working with, you know, young and underrepresented creatives in the industry on that. And then, yes, I want to figure out how to do my art thing. There's, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, why don't you just do it as a hobby? You know, why don't you and I don't know. It's what I think about. I paint in my head all day long, so I can't kind of quiet that need and passion. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say today is just really listen to that inner voice of what's just telling you what you want to do all the time, because you can make a career out of it. And that's really what I'm trying to figure out next. So I'm focused on, in this current role, you know, how I'm going to build it up to be the best it can be. But for me personally, you know, I see my kind of what used to be called retirement as my second career. And I hope you're focusing on art next.
Well, I think that was, again, a really amazing talk, and it's really nice to see someone in your position as a executive creative director who's clearly very approachable and has these lovely qualities about them, and doesn't seem at all intimidating. And I hope that our UEL students will understand that, you know, it's about getting out there. It's about actually talking to people. It's about showing your work and not being afraid, and sort of building your confidence and listening to others. So this was a super great talk. I think it was really, really useful for everyone. Thank you so much, Shirin. We won't take any more of your very busy time.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully we'll be able to see you around UEL in the future. Would love to have you again.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And feel free to get in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye.